Here we are again. You're remembering the past podcast team with me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Corey.
And there's Sam.
Little snot-nosed Sid. Hi, Sid.
Hi, everybody.
Well, as you can tell, we have a little different format tonight for our subject because our subject is a special podcast, and we're going to introduce him thusly.
If you have a little trouble getting started in the morning, what you need is a little cheap trash.
Lujack's cheap, trashy, showbiz report, flash, Hollywood.
What you need is Chicago's favorite morning disc jockey.
Larry Lujack.
Uncle Lair gets more people going than anyone else. So if he can't get you started, nothing can.
Larry Lujack, Superjock.
On WLS.
I'll tell you, with me, nothing comes easy. I've been waiting for Larry Lujack for hours. I figure if I got this morning show on WLS, well, then I get some respect, pardon me. For WLS, they're bigger than ever. I hear everyone listens to Larry Lujack. I see they got some new faces around here. Well, he's got music, news, traffic. I had your brother for dinner, and I tell you, Larry Lujack, he appreciates comedy. Oh, he'll be glad to see me. Hey, Larry.
Easy, fella. I tell you, I don't get no respect.
Well, tonight we're going to do Larry Lujack, who died recently at the age of 73, and Larry Lujack was, quite simply, the greatest disc jockey ever. I listened to him through my formative years and through my not-so-formative years in Chicago, and I could say of all the disc jockeys I've ever heard in every market, no one could compare with Larry Lujack. He was quite a talent. For tonight's show, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a piece that I wrote about him for the Chicago Tribune and intersperse a couple of cuts of stuff that's really vintage Lujack. When he died last week, Larry Lujack had not been a regular disc jockey on a major Chicago radio station for over a quarter of a century. Yet tributes poured in not just from Chicago, but from all over the country. How was he able to evoke vivid, long-ago memories from so many people, most of whom never met him personally? It is a testimony to the medium and to the man. Lujack became a DJ in the early 1960s during the emerging heyday of AM Top 40 radio. With a huge youth market across America poised to listen to rock music, the disc jockey's job was to fill airtime between music, news, traffic, and commercials with upbeat patter, jokes, and feigned excitement. The DJs of the time were basically variations on Dick Clark from American Bandstand. Vacuous smiles, perpetual happiness, but somewhat less than genuine. Lujack was the groundbreaker, the first to abandon the standard DJ attitude. Sarcastic, barbed, and blessed with a great voice for radio, if he thought a record was bad, he'd tell his audience. His own tastes ran more toward country than rock. Likewise with station promotions. If he thought they were stupid, he'd let the audience know. Occasionally he'd rip commercials and even station sponsors themselves. Not the best approach early in a career.
You know, once upon a time, and this is back in the early days of radio and Spokane and Boise and places like that, I was trying to be what everybody else was like on the radio in those days. And I figured, that was too hard. It was just a whole lot easier to just be me. And in a lot of places, that didn't fly. That did not work. They say, oh, you don't sound friendly enough. You don't smile. You're too cranky and grouchy. Well, hell, that's the way I am.
But above all, he was sincere. Radio audiences, especially teenagers, had never heard such sincerity from a DJ. With the Vietnam War raging in an era of iconoclasm and rebellion against authority, Lujack was the ultimate anti-authority figure. Not political, because his politics were never stated, and it would be oversimplistic to say he sided with kids against parents or with parents against kids. His real target was hypocrisy, no matter where he found it, and one place it was easy to find was radio itself, a fertile source of his material.
You felt no strong connection to Chicago because you didn't grow up here, even though you had your great success here. But your very name is really about Chicago in a way, isn't it?
If you say so.
Well, tell the story of how you came to be Larry Lujack.
What kind of a question is that? Is this the kind of hard investigative journalism you do on TV, Bob?
Combine that with a rapier-like wit and a laid-back on-air persona, and he did what only a handful of others could do then or now, make talking about everyday subjects not just interesting, but compelling. Not for 4 hours every day, no one can do that, but long enough that people in their cars or in their homes tuned in religiously to hear what he had to say each day.
Last Thanksgiving, all the family was in the house getting ready for this big Thanksgiving dinner. And somebody took the big frozen turkey out of the freezer. It is a big turkey, about 25 or 30 pounds.
Yeah?
And it was all frosty and kind of slippery. Taken it to the oven. And whoever was carrying it accidentally dropped it on the family's little Chihuahua dog.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was killed instantly. Little Tommy.
Oh, it's tragic.
Yeah, it is. And Thanksgiving Day dinner was then canceled because nobody was in the in the mood to eat. He didn't have any pictures of it, though, unfortunately.
Last week after his death, person after person recounted things he said on radio over 40 years ago. Imagine the talent required to do that. Part of his genius was making it sound so easy. As he moved between Chicago's two radio giants, WLS and WCFL, he developed regular features, the cheap, trashy showbiz report and clunk letter of the day, that sounded improvised, but were actually meticulously prepared and always listener-friendly.
It's 15 minutes past 7 o'clock at WLS. Time for the Larry Lujack Clunk Letter of the Day. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dun. Today's letter is from a housewife whose name is Dorothy. Anyway, Dorothy, thank you for writing. And before you take the kids to school this morning, remember, Superjock! Nice, clean underwear, because you never know. Dean Martin, WLS, Detroit City. I wanna go. I want to go home.
Later in his career, he and fellow DJ Tommy Edwards created Animal Stories, a certifiable radio classic.
Get your greasy little face up next to the radio because it's time for America's favorite radio program, Animal Stories. And now here in person is the Animal Stories news team anchorman, your charming and delightful old Uncle Lair, and him in person, little Tommy. Hi, Tommy. Good morning, Uncle Lair. Good morning. Hi, everybody. According to police in Willenhall, England, a horse-drawn cart of scrap drew up behind a motorcyclist at a railroad crossing gate, which was down to allow a train to pass. The horse proceeded to drool on the cyclist. Here's some biker, little Tommy, sitting there on his big Harley, minding his own business, waiting for this train to go by. Horse pulls up, starts drooling. So he got mad, it says here, gave the horse his best elbow shot right to the horse's face. Well, but in the process, when he lifted up his arm to give this horse an elbow shot, he let go of his clutch. And his motorcycle lurched forward, little Tommy, into the car in front of him. Meanwhile, the horse, who has just been punched in the face, rears up, dumps the load of scrap onto the car behind, which rolled backwards under the weight and rammed the front of yet another car on the line. Now, seeing this chain reaction, a passing dog walker tied his terrier to the railroad gate and went to help out. But the train had passed, and the gate went up, pulling the dog 20 feet into the air. By his neck, see his... The dog's owner shouted to another pedestrian to lower the gate, which came down on and damaged the roof of a passing Mercedes-Benz. Oh, wow. I don't know how it doesn't say how the dog is. I suppose it would depend on which side of the gate he was tied to. If he was on the side that came crashing down to the Mercedes-Benz, the dog probably not going to be okay.
New ornament, yeah.
Biker all right? Biker's fine, little Tommy.
How about the horse?
Horse is fine as well.
Oh, good.
The ratings validated his approach. For over a decade, he dominated Chicago rock radio and became one of the nation's highest-paid radio personalities. But the ratings never told the entire story of his popularity. The WLS signal was especially strong and clear at night, so people all over the Midwest and South heard a DJ unlike any from their hometown. In Missouri, a teenage Rush Limbaugh listened, learned, and borrowed from the Lujack style liberally, including phrases still in use today, such as talent on loan from God. An aspiring comedian from Ball State in Indiana, David Letterman, would tune into animal stories regularly and was influenced by the tongue-in-cheek delivery. Because Lujack pushed the limits of radio, it was inevitable that those who came after would push boundaries further. Part of his legacy is the shock jock, including Steve Dahl, Howard Stern, and Jonathan Brandmeier. They all have talent, but it was Lujack who paved the ground for them to display their skills. In his later years, as the airwaves got raunchier, his ratings suffered, in part because he refused to pander to the new, coarser spirit of the day. When one of his sons died under tragic circumstances, he seemed less focused afterwards. Though he never talked about his family on the air, the one time he broke the rule and briefly described his grief over his son's death was one of the most moving segments of radio I ever heard. As we grow older, we all remember virtuoso performances we were lucky enough to witness in our lifetimes. Perhaps it was Olivier doing Henry V, Charlie Parker playing sax, or Jordan on the basketball court. We silently regret that our children or other young people can never share that experience. It can be recreated. There is certainly plenty of video of Michael Jordan or Olivier, but watching video lacks the spontaneity and sense of immediacy. The performer's brilliance can be appreciated, but not their true genius, and young people are poorer for having missed the performer live. Thus it is to listen to tape of Larry Lujack today. The wit, the strategic pauses, and the rhythm all testify to his virtuosity. But to appreciate his genius, you would have had to have been listening around 1970. The freshness and vibrancy in those old airwaves are somewhere in deep space now, but the memories attached to them are still indelibly etched in the minds of his listeners everywhere. Thanks, Uncle Lair.
He writes, Dear Uncle Lair and Little Tommy, recently I was witness to a tragic event, and I wanted you and your faithful listeners to share my sorrow. As I was entering the liquor store in Lake Forest to buy my lunch the other day, I noticed a toy poodle trying to thread his way through the traffic at Lake Forest's busiest intersection. After being narrowly missed by two Cadillacs and a Mercedes SL, of course, Lake Forest is a wealthy community.
Sure is.
After being narrowly missed by these two Cadillacs and a Mercedes SL, it arrived safely at the far side of the street, and I and my fellow bystanders breathed a collective sigh of relief. Continuing on its jaunty way, the tiny dog then made the fatal mistake of stopping to squat on the adjacent Chicago and Northwestern tracks directly in the path of the 1151, which does not stop in Lake Forest.
It's not a local, it's an express. Oh, wow.
John says, I was so shaken by this tragedy that I drank more lunch than I usually do and had to go home from work early.
Oh, wow.
No pictures, though, because didn't have his camera.
I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Taps. I remember I called in once after he and Little Tommy did a story about a Scottish guy who left $12 million to his chicken. And I called up and asked, Lair doesn't want to make you choke that chicken. He and Tommy Edwards started to crack up, and then he said to me, Corey, don't ever call this radio station again. It was the highlight of my radio career. Well, Lair, thanks again for the memories. I know you love Merle Haggard, and I know you love The Long Black Veil. So that's what we're going to close with.
She walks these hills in a long black veil and visits my grave where the night winds wave. And nobody knows, Lord, and nobody sees. Nobody knows but me. Larry Lujack, Larry Lujack, Larry Lujack, Larry Lujack, Superjock.